find such a love at our age. Whoever thought we could dance on a...
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I'm your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmers.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. Judy, what is today's topic?
Rebuilding Intimacy After Shame, an interview with Chandler Rogers.
Indeed, we just finished that interview. What a fascinating guy and fascinating work.
So thoughtful too.
Yeah, and I want to be really clear right up front what we're talking about. Rebuilding intimacy after shame. The particular app that he has developed called Relay is especially for people. I think he said it's 85% of the folks doing it are men, and then there's 50% women who are dealing with especially pornography and sort of addiction or compulsive use of pornography and the effects that
sexual
has.
Addictions.
And other sexual addictions as well. And I thought we had a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And so do check that out and check out his information. Before we go to that interview, I want to put in another plug for, I'm looking for readers, pre-publication readers of the book that am I close enough to say finishing up? I'm close to finishing up?
Close to.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Probably another month, frankly, but a little while. It's a workbook, the title of which is The Passion Paradox, and the subtitle is something like, this is not 100% sure yet, When You Feel Miles Apart and Still Love Each Other. So it's for people where, I talk a lot about stability and intimacy. We do in this, in this episode with Chandler Rogers. It comes up a lot.
It up.
And he brought it up because he's seen us.
You didn't even bring it up.
That's right. Astonishingly, he brought it up. So we talk about that. But this book that I'm writing is actually centered on those ideas of stability and intimacy. And you do it's a workbook. You do an assessment of your own relationship. Right. And then I get quite specific about dealing with a whole different bunch of areas of relationship issues where that may impact stability and I think especially intimacy. So I'm looking for people, especially if that's your story, and it's not a happy story, but if that's your story, that you're in a relationship, or maybe you've been in a relationship where you love each other, but there is that distance, which is often about lack of intimacy. I don't just mean sex, I mean more generally, intimacy.
Right.
If that's you, especially, I would welcome, get in touch with me and let me know you'd be interested in being a pre-publication reader. Of course, I'm hoping if you like the book, you would then be willing when it comes out to do a review. I would also hope maybe you could do a blurb if that, if you're the sort of person who does blurbs, you know who you are, that sort of thing. Judy, how could people get in touch with me if they want to do that?
Well, there's some websites they could go to. First one is our CTIN7, that's the number 7.com for Couples Therapy in 7. CTIN7.com, they can go there. They can go to BruceChalmer.com.
BruceChalmer.com. Yeah, BruceChalmer.com gets you there too.
Yes, but CTIN7 will come to, you can see all about our podcast too.
Yep, that's where you go. And similarly, if you want to rate us and see other episodes and stuff like that,
and like us and follow us and do all those social media things, and why don't we get on with this interview?
Let's get on with the interview. So we will see you on the other side.
Our guest today is Chandler Rogers. Chandler is the founder of Relay, an app that helps individuals and couples heal from the impact of pornography and rebuild intimacy. Drawing from his own recovery journey, he's passionate about helping people show up fully in their relationships and live with deeper purpose and connection. Chandler lives in Salt Lake City, Utah with his wife and 18-month-old son. Chandler, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you. So we always like to start out with our guests. Tell us something about how you got into the work you do. Tell us something about your journey.
Yeah, well, I kind of gave it away a little bit in the bio through my personal experience dealing with pornography and feeling like I was stuck and I did not know how to get out. Now, I never actually planned to go this route with my career, so that's a little bit of a longer story. Really, so just background on me, I grew up the oldest of 5 kids. And we were a Christian household, so I had heard, pornography, something that was bad. I understood it as a sin. something that I should stay away from. And as I was entering kind of my teenage years, I think I was 14 years old. I didn't go looking for it. It was kind of around the age where Facebook and Instagram were really blowing up and becoming popular. And so, I got my first smartphone, and the moderation of content, I think even back then, this was, a while ago now, the sexualization of content wasn't as filtered as it is nowadays on those platforms. And so I remember not even having to search anything. It was just
Mm,
sexualized content was kind of finding me, and it was intriguing, right? It piqued curiosity,
of course.
as is
Indeed.
natural, right? I'm a
Right.
14-year-old boy, and that's cool. But I still had this, clear idea in the back of my head, like I'm a good kid. I felt this, I think, sense of responsibility just being the oldest. We moved around a lot. That was part of my story. Like I think I moved 7 times, 7 different states before I left the house,
Wow.
and I felt like, whether it was academics or sports or music, I could kind of set my mind to what I wanted to and work hard for it and achieve. Like I think I had a bit of a achiever complex, if you will, where like I wanted to strive for, the best that I could be, probably for some healthy parts of me and maybe some not so healthy parts of me. But as I was getting exposed to this content, I think I don't really know where it slipped into where I would describe it as feeling very compulsive and something that was
Mm-hmm.
unwanted and hard to control, but it
Hmm.
did eventually. So it was probably over a couple years there in those high school time period where I realized, like, okay, this has become, porn and masturbation, something that I don't want. It has crept into my life without me really pursuing it. And it felt more elusive the more I tried to get a handle on it, so to speak. And that bothered me. So there was kind of this moral, like, shame, I think, that I felt around, I'm doing something that if my parents knew, if my, people at church knew, I would feel bad. But I think what honestly bothered me the most was feeling like I couldn't control it. Like the harder I
Mm-hmm.
tried to
Hmm.
stop, it's almost like the more frequent it got, the worse it got. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'll summarize my story a little bit, where I eventually found a group, and it was for young adult men. It was over Zoom, led by a therapist. And I was actually really open to the idea of joining a group because over the span of this like few year period, I realized that, man, I must be doing something wrong, because the harder I try alone, it's like I couldn't do it. So
Yeah.
let me try not doing it alone. Now, over
Mm-hmm.
the last decade, I've talked to tons of guys who have gone through groups, and I don't think this is always the common path where maybe so early in life there's a willingness to step into a group. I talked to a lot of men who, they continue to, try for years and years and years, feeling like that leap into a group or something like that is scary. But I jumped in. It was my senior year. I was like 17 or 18 years old, and that was where I first, I think, saw the importance of connection. And that theme stuck with me over the years to come, as I was more open about my story and the impacts that porn had had on my own mental health and my self-image and the shame that took me a long time to navigate through. Later on, I eventually realized that the barrier to get help, to reach out to say, hey, this is something I'm dealing with, is hard. It's something that we don't want to talk about a lot in this society. And so how Relay came about, the app that we're building now, was really born out of this experience and realizing, what if there was a way that made it less scary and less awkward for people who are dealing with this in isolation to get a support system and to
Mm.
get accountability in a way that's not shameful, as opposed to having to walk into a, call it like a church basement 12-step group. What if there was
Mhm.
a digital app? And so that was kind of how my story led to creating Relay. I had a professional background later on in tech. I worked for a couple of startups, and so that also contributed to feeling like building a tech platform was the right approach for me.
You had the skills there, basically.
Yes,
What,
yeah.
why did you call it Relay? I'm kind of curious about that.
At the beginning, it actually wasn't called Relay. We ran into kind of a trademark issue early on, so we ended up pivoting names, and uh, we debated a bunch of names, but Relay stood out because of a relay race. I ran track in high school,
Hmm.
and with a relay race, it is a individual effort. Like you're running your own part of the race. It's still very much a personal thing, but it can only be done as a team. And so
Hmm.
that idea, as we think about recovery, just really resonated with me, that this is a race that, is better ran together with other people in connection. and it's still an individual and very personal thing. So kind of both of those pieces together, I think, captures the name Relay.
Hmm. Yeah, wow.
Good name for it.
Yeah, it's interesting as you were describing the sense of it being compulsive. It's kind of, I'm hesitating on the word textbook. I don't know if it's the textbook definition of addiction, but in practice, addiction means you can't seem to stop doing something you know to be harmful. Is that how you
Yep.
understand the concept?
Totally. Yeah. And I think over the years, I know there's a lot of debate in the clinical field around, yeah, what constitutes an addiction? And I think a lot of people want to know, am I really addicted?
Hmm.
I think for me, it was like the simple definition you just gave was totally it. I
Yeah,
want to stop and I feel powerless in my ability to do so. And I
yeah.
need help outside of myself to do it.
Yeah, and I think the reason I like that, it's a very operational kind of definition.
Yeah.
It's that never mind, is it physiological? Is it, I mean, I don't think there's any actual difference between physiological and psychological or, emotional and mental or whatever you want to call it. It's just operationally that's what's going on, and you need some help to stop it. So, what is it that makes porn particularly, well, not only particularly susceptible to addiction, but what do you think about porn in general? Is it possible for porn to be used in a way that isn't addictive?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a separate question from to whatever extent you have objection to the very concept of, how
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
produced, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's absolutely possible with almost anything. You can use something to some extent in moderation, and maybe it doesn't take the same amount of negative toll on somebody. But this is a nuanced question because everyone's different, right? It probably
Yeah.
depends on your personal values, what defines integrity for you, how does this impact your relationships, which I'm excited to get. I'm sure we'll get into that in this
It was
episode.
going to
But
be one of our next
um,
questions. Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
for for me though, I was young, right? I was not in a relationship or a serious relationship at the time. I'm married now. I've been married for 5 years, and so things are different now. And I actually have continued to have some degree of struggle in our marriage. So that's been a different chapter. And
Mm.
as I think about, can somebody use porn and have it not be an addiction? Yeah, I mean, all the time I've talked to guys who are like, yeah, no, I like most people, use pornography to some extent, but not really anymore. I outgrew it, or I'm in a
Mhm.
relationship. It's not a problem anymore. Or and maybe I'm biasing and using the word problem. I guess I originally thought, maybe the people who care about pornography are coming from more of a moral, religious context, whatever the faith kind of tradition is.
Mhm.
It's funny, as I've done Relay, it's only maybe, I say only, it's like 60% of our community, thousands of people that identify as religious of some sort. So
No, that
40%
is
of
interesting.
people,
Yeah.
yeah, 40% of people, which is actually a lot more than I expected it to be originally, are coming in for other reasons. So that to me
Yeah.
points to this thing in our society. Usage wise, I would describe it as an epidemic. It is so common, in the average age of exposure, most studies point to, is 11 years old. So
Mhm.
Yeah,
while
yeah,
the
I've
brain
heard
is
that.
still very much developing and wiring,
Yeah.
it's like there's this hypernormal stimulus. And Anna Lembke talks about just the theory of dopamine and the dopamine commoditization that's happened in our society,
Mhm.
whether it's porn, masturbation, social media, binging Netflix, sugary foods, like whatever it is, right? Our brains are like, these dopamine thresholds have arguably been upped over the years as a society. And so there's lots of different studies out there looking at what are the societal impacts on porn, how it fuels sex trafficking, how it fuels, I mean, child sexual abuse material, and like, are these platforms really safe? I come
Mhm.
down to, on a personal level, a lot of the people that we work with and that I've talked to, and just kind of reflecting more on my own story, it's often really related to, I'm trying to soothe a wound. It's not really a porn problem. It's a pain
Mm. Yeah.
problem. This is really an
That's
adaptive mechanism I learned to help me feel better for
yeah.
something.
I mean,
And
that's the
so I
general
think,
truth.
yeah.
That's what addiction is. Yeah.
Right.
Pretty
Right.
much all
Yeah.
addictions are that.
And
Yeah.
and I think that's the real thing that I think is important to focus on. It's less about, is porn bad? I think, in your heart, if you've seen the impacts in your life or in your relationship, I think most people acknowledge that to some extent, even if they don't admit it publicly. But understanding that it might be distracting you from some other, gap or neglect or wound, trauma that's been unaddressed in your life, I think usually there's a deeper opportunity for healing and growth that this can unlock. So we do tell people when they come into our program, you don't have a porn problem, you have a pain problem, and this is less about helping you quit porn and more about helping you become a healthy human being that can meet your
Hmm.
needs the way that
Yeah.
aligns with your integrity.
So how does Relay differ from, say, the program that you went into that helped you with your porn addiction?
Yeah. Well, so the program I went into, I had to jump on a Zoom call. That was my first interaction. I had no idea
Hmm.
who was going to be on the other end of the screen. So that was like
Hmm.
a first step that was a very high, call it requirement for courage. At least it felt that way. And once I stepped in there, it felt like, wow, this is so, so much more supportive and encouraging than I could have expected. So there's a lot of similarities. What we were trying to do with Relay is package that into an app where somebody doesn't need to show their face or hop onto a live Zoom call. So a lot of it just happens through the app. So we match somebody into a group based on their gender, their age, are they in a relationship or not? Do they want to be with other people who have a kind of a faith-based mindset around this or not? So we kind of match groups that way into like 7 or 8 people groups. So these are small teams, if you will. And what it allows is somebody to anonymously come in and not even have to say anything or talk to a human being, talk out loud, like hop on a phone call. Like that's not required for like an intake process. Like I had to go through an intake process with the therapist.
Hmm.
And by the way, I still very much believe in the role of therapy, and a lot of our people in our community work with great therapists. And so there's definitely a synergy there. But it's making that first step of I can actually go in 15 minutes from being alone and having never talked to somebody about this or never having a support environment or accountability community to help support me. In 15 minutes I can get that, and it's not like a Reddit or a Facebook where it's like thousands of people and it's like, no one really knows me. It's like I can be seen and known in a pretty
Yeah.
small group but still feel safe enough to practice vulnerability. And so there's a lot there to unpack, but I think there's a lot of similarities, but we're just trying to package it in a way that can reach people, earlier on.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It fits more, oddly enough, fits more with that era of kids growing up with digital interactions almost
Yeah.
more than personal interactions. Of course,
Yeah.
there's a sort of a good news, bad news there, right? That it in some ways you're going for people who may have a difficult time with personal relationships, and you're making it easier for them to enter in without having to actually have personal relationships. On the other hand, the thing that I hear in what you're saying that encourages me in thinking about this is that where they're going. I've worked over the years with quite a few people. I mean, dealing with porn one way or another. And one of the things that I've noted occasionally is somebody will get on one of these groups that are so extreme and pathologizing in how they talk about everything
Yeah.
that they end up being traumatized by it, or they end up thinking that they're just irrevocably broken or
I
something like
I'm an
that.
addict and always an
Yeah,
addict. Yep. Yep.
yeah. So it sounds like that is not the sort of approach you're taking.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think a lot of that does stem from some of the culture and AA traditions,
Yeah.
and I don't have anything overall negative towards AA, but we do have a lot of guys come in and they're like, I have attended some other groups, and it did feel, pathologizing in the way that it kind of was trying to condemn me to this, like I am a sex addict, and like, wow,
Yes.
I've never used that term before. That feels aggressive,
Yeah.
yeah, I think really a lot of this is about shame, right? When we can
Mhm.
remove the shame, it makes it a lot easier to mold behavior and to heal underlying wounds. But
Yeah.
yeah, when it's all about, hey, I have a porn problem and you do too, and we're all in this boat together. And I should add, it's a lot of the people in our community are not the age I was when I was getting help. These are often, so we have groups for men and women, but 85% are men. So I'll just generalize
Mhm.
and say, men who are married. So they're coming in. It's like, and I've hurt my spouse, and she found
Mhm.
out, and I feel like a terrible person, and I have for 20 years, and I haven't known what to do about it. So it's like there's this natural sense of hopelessness and shame just by nature of like how
Mhm.
how deep the problem has gone for so long and how long they felt stuck and unable to do something. So yeah, how do we help guys step out of that shame? Like our goal internally is like we want somebody to go within 24 hours to feeling less shame, because we can't promise
Yeah.
somebody. A lot of programs out there are like, hey, 90 days you're going to be free of this, here's our specialized coaching program, whatever, yada yada yada. And
Yeah.
maybe those work for some people. We try, like, the ethics for me, like the heart of this for me is I do want people to get better faster, but the
Mhm.
benchmark or the metric is not just, are you porn free? It's, can we help move the needle in all these other indicators? And I think one of the leading indicators that precedes sobriety is shame reduction. Like, can
Oh
we
yeah.
actually help you
Yeah.
see yourself differently? And like, we've seen that these guys can really shift that quickly with the right kind of training wheels. And so yeah, we try to do that in these groups. And we've also collaborated with some therapists to provide some content. So it's not like they're just, thrown in a group and good luck, figure it out together. There's also some structured, like, daily tasks that they have. And then there's, a number of other tools that we provide to help them, like, not just track sobriety, they're also tracking self-care. Okay, so how do we actually, think about caring for our bodies, sleep, diet, exercise? How do we care for our, mental health? How do we start to not just think about what we don't want and move towards what we do want, and building a healthy life that's meeting our needs in these other areas? And relationships are a big part of that too.
That I was just going to ask you about that. So, in terms of relationships, one of the things I've noted, my most recent book is about betrayal and forgiveness. And the notion of betrayal, and I start off talking about what do I mean by betrayal, I have noted, and this isn't like the norm, but I've seen it a fair amount of times, especially with porn. It's a really good example. Sometimes a couple will come in, it's almost universally the guy is the one who was using porn and the woman is really upset about it. And she is feeling like that's the same as if he was having sex with someone. And the
Right.
guy is usually mystified because to him, it's not anything like having sex with someone. And sometimes the work, it seems like what evolves in the work, because it's not for me to tell them how they're supposed to feel, but sometimes what seems to evolve is the woman realizes, okay, I don't like it. It's really distasteful. I disapprove of it for a variety of reasons, but it isn't the same as cheating. She can see it in a more, she can understand him somewhat better, and that just lowers the temperature right there. And I'm curious, yeah, how do you work with couples? How do you work with like spouses?
Yeah. Yeah, we've been focused almost exclusively on, can we just, like, we've been focused on the individual seeking recovery. Can we help them establish some sobriety? Because what we do have some clinicians on our advisory board that do a lot of couples work, and what we know is, like, it's really important to, in the wake of that trauma and that discovery. Again, I'm not the expert here, but being able to, for the one that has created some sort of betrayal, to be able to develop some sort of consistency or rebuilding evidence around, I'm taking responsibility and I do
Mm,
care about making change. And so we're,
mhm.
we're trying to do everything in our power on our platform to empower a lot of these guys to have daily concrete things where it's not, I'm reporting back to my wife. That's often, as I'm sure you've seen, not a healthy accountability
Tends
relationship.
not to work. Right.
But where she can see, okay, he is involved using this platform with his group. We also do have live Zoom meetings that guys can step into if they want that more live connection.
Uh-huh.
So it's
Hmm.
okay, I'm attending meetings, and maybe that's once a week, but the other thing is, the other 6 days of the week, if I don't have time for an hour long Zoom meeting, I've got the app where I'm still checking in with my group and logging my data, and, like, working through the lessons. And so I think it helps instill that initial sense of, like, like a lot of the spouses that I have heard from the guys talking about, like, I'll ask them, is your wife aware of this? Where are you guys at in this? And of course, it varies across the board. Some are very hurt, very upset. There's some separation, or they're already, navigating a divorce, or it ranges. But a lot of them are actually pretty supportive while also being hurt. And I think what that looks like is they are wanting him to find the right help. They're recognizing that it
Yeah.
maybe is stemming from something else. It's not all about just, like, him wanting to cheat on me through this virtual method. It's, okay, this started when he was a young teenage boy and it
Hmm.
just stuck around. I wish he would have been honest. It really hurts. I'm oversimplifying the partner's perspective, of course.
Sure.
Um, but I'm focusing from the man's perspective. Okay, I have this thing that I can do to at least demonstrate that I'm serious about getting help. And I think that's, from the individual seeking recovery, that's like largely all you can control. And what's hard is,
Hmm.
like, a lot of these guys will make a lot of progress. I was just talking to a few last night on one of our meetings where they're doing the best they've ever done. The average maybe relapse cycle for many of these guys is like weekly, every other day, like it's multiple times a week, and getting to like 2 weeks is a huge milestone. Getting to a month is like, I've never done that since this thing started 30 years
Mhm.
ago. Like it feels so out of reach, and they're getting to this point of sobriety of a month, 2 month, 3 months. So like some serious sobriety based on their baseline and what I would consider like really significant outcomes and progress, along with other indicators of healing. But it's like, man, my wife is still just feeling. It's like she's feeling even more betrayed and hurt than she was 3 months ago when I started this
Mm,
thing.
yeah.
And so we often have this conversation about like, man, like you're like the healing timeline that you're both on is not always going to sync up. It often doesn't
No,
sync
and
up, and that's a hard
it,
thing to navigate.
I mean, like any sort of betrayal, there's usually a context which involves both parties. And I'm careful to say it that way because it's not about blaming the person who was cheated on for the cheating. That's not it. It's not about absolving someone of responsibility for doing something flat out immoral or against their own values or against, their partner's values. But there is a context. And so often you'll find that, okay, the one of the my favorite analogies when I'm talking about issues of stability and intimacy, one of the
Mm.
contexts is intimacy involves tolerating anxiety. And when a couple doesn't do that, it's like a plant where somebody paved a sidewalk over it. It's going to try and crack the sidewalk. That energy.
So are you saying that
Yeah.
pornography is a substitution for intimacy?
Not necessarily. Who knows what it is, but whatever the betrayal was, there was that sort of speaks to to what Chandler was talking about, where you have spouses who are just they're observing somebody
Mm.
clearly making changes along the lines they would like, but they're still feeling so hurt. There's an element there where there's probably other stuff they're not addressing, which is part of the context where it happened. So again, I'm not saying that's why he was using porn, but that may well be they were having intimacy issues in general that was, that were a part of the context of what was going on.
Close, yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm sure you guys have defined this very well in other episodes, but I think it's so key to remember intimacy is not just sex. It's not problems
absolutely.
in sex. It's
Right.
problems in closeness, in
Yes.
attachment,
Yes.
secure, healthy, stability. Yeah, I love that you guys talk about the stability and intimacy.
Yeah.
Um, I have this theory. So we've had over 6,000 people come through our program. So we have a lot of data points that at some point we'd like to do more formal research on this. But um, eh, part of like the clinical approach that we take with the content that we have in the app is driven by attachment theory and just the understanding that we all come from broken family systems, even to like minor extents. Like maybe you didn't have your parents get a divorce, maybe you weren't abused, maybe you didn't move around 20 times and like never feel like you fit in, but there's probably little ways where you felt missed or you didn't get your needs 100% met by your caregivers 100% of the time. And this
I
often
think that's called
coincides
life,
with,
isn't it?
yeah, I think that's a great way to summarize it. Where
Yes.
and then at what age am I exposed to all of this? Like again, this super hyper normal stimulus, this sexualized content. It's often in those formative teenage years where we're seeking belonging, connection, attunement. We want to fit in. We want to be seen. We want to be understood, and that continues on later through romantic relationships. And so even before likely you're in a committed relationship, for a lot of these guys, the call it the wound that often led to maybe some of the soothing, this pattern, this compulsion or addiction, whatever you want to call it, stemmed from what I would summarize as like a bid for connection. It's maybe not a bid for like romantic connection. Maybe that is part of the present story in a marriage. That like, I mean, I'll give an example. Like relationships are really hard. Sometimes my wife is really tired because our toddler at home is a complete handful. And I feel often disappointed after a long day at work when I'm like, I just want to be seen. I want her to care about my day. I want to talk. I want to cuddle. And she's just like, wants none of that. This is a real
Right.
story that may or may not have happened this week. Um, and it's like that, those
You're talking
micro
about a friend
doses
of
of,
yours. It's a friend
yeah,
of yours.
a friend
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like micro doses for me, like some of the biggest triggers are like feeling a little bit of resentment. Like I'm carrying so much at home and at work. I know you're doing, it's not taking away anything from you, but man, it's like, so turning to a screen, just to summarize, I think is really saying, I could go get my needs met over here. A
Mm.
bid for connection and connection for a blanket umbrella for any emotional need. I think it's easier to go get this through an artificial mechanism because real relationships are hard, whether it's your romantic partner or back when this started, it probably was in your family relationships with your peer group, just life as a human being. Meeting our emotional needs is hard. Relationships are hard. Video games, social media, porn are all things that I can go withdraw and it feels more comforting. It's easier alone. That's
Yeah.
my theory.
Well,
At like,
you don't have that emotional intimacy that you have in a relationship. It's like, let's get this over with and done, and then, I'll go to bed.
yeah. Yeah, I'll minimize my
Yeah.
needs by going
Yeah.
elsewhere. Yeah.
Mm,
It's interesting too that I think a specific thing about porn, as compared with other kinds of addictions, is that it seems to be the way that kids are learning about what sex is,
Yeah.
which is itself a problem, even for people who don't get compulsively involved with it. The
Yeah.
kids who think, both boys and girls, who end up thinking this is the way people are supposed to behave when they're
mhm.
watching
And the
actors on
way
a
people are
screen.
supposed to look too.
Yeah, but what
True. True.
look and respond,
Right.
It
and
does make it seem easy, right? It's like, oh,
yeah.
I can go pursue a girl and she basically just gives herself to me. Like I'm not, yeah, without going into detail, like, yeah, porn absolutely. In movies too. Call it non-pornographic,
Mhm.
just romance, I think doesn't accurately portray the work and the friction and the difficulty that is stability and intimacy. Do you
Yeah.
guys think
Hmm.
that's fair?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
one of our favorite things to talk about. This came this happened what last year, whenever it was, when we were going to interview a guest, and the guest had an emergency and just didn't show. It turned out they were having an emergency, so we were thinking, well, we want to record a podcast, so which we do. And you remember I said something along the lines of, "Oh, I know. Let's talk about the one skill that solves all relationship problems." Not
Yeah.
too grandiose, right? Just a little.
Oh,
And
what
and
is
you,
it? I
yeah,
want to
you looked
know.
at me like, oh yeah, right. But you're a good sport. You went along. And what is that skill? Well, I claim that skill is the ability to be moderately annoyed without freaking out.
Yeah.
Because that is when you talk about
With the other
relationships
person.
with the other person. Yeah,
Right.
the idea of relationships being hard. I mean, I don't know. They're not always hard, but the one thing I know for sure is that I'm annoying as hell, and she's very nice about it. She's not annoying at all, but I am, and Judy needs that skill way more than I do. Because I'm the annoying one.
Of
But
course, of course.
but that is, I mean, even you on incredibly rare occasions, I could experience as a tiny bit annoying.
Yes,
That is
you have let me know that too.
on occasion. That is that phenomenon. Any human being is going to be annoying. That doesn't show up in porn. Nobody's annoying. And
Right.
even in other movies, the only way people are annoying are when they turn it into comedy.
Hmm.
But they don't turn it into sort of day to day over the long haul, pretty much not changing much annoyance, which is that's the reality of any human being,
Relationships
of
and
relationships.
living
Yeah.
under the
Yeah,
same
it's like to get that
roof.
reward, that
Yeah.
gratification. It often is through this tolerating of some form of discomfort,
Yeah.
annoyance, or like. And sometimes I think for me, what I've noticed, it's not so much as what she does that's annoying. It's what she doesn't do that creates this
Mm.
discomfort or this letdown or disappointment or again resentment, discouragement, whatever. Man, I wish that I had more from you emotionally. So yeah, both sides of like I don't feel like I'm being treated fairly or the way that you are creates this kind of discomfort
Mhm.
that I have to tolerate. I like that. Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
I guess that's the silver bullet skill. We can just end the episode.
Solves everything. And that I don't know why I bother writing books or doing podcasts, because that just solves.
There you
But
go.
it is something, because the thing that happens over the long haul, and this is, like John Gottman's research,
Mhm.
talks about this. The couples that do well over a long time, it's not that they're not experiencing the annoyances, but they don't amount to much because they've sort of long since written them off. It's
Mm.
like, all right, that's just who that person is, and I'm so grateful to have them that what do I care?
Mhm.
Which it's like it isn't even annoying anymore, really. It's just silly. And so then you sort of laugh it off and move on, and it doesn't cause any damage after a while because people are just accepting of it. They're used to it. Now, again, I don't, this came up when we did the podcast, remember, and we got some feedback saying, well, what about if it isn't just annoyance? What about if it's something really serious? Well, of course,
Harmful. Yeah.
there are things that can
Yeah. Like,
rise
should
to
I
the level of,
tolerate? Yeah. In this case,
right.
if I still just feel hurt or unsafe by what my partner's doing emotionally or physically, yeah. Do I just tolerate it or what? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, people need to address it. And of course, that's another part of that skill. Just the fact,
No, I was going to say porn addiction is not a mild annoyance.
no,
That
no,
doesn't fall
exactly.
in that
No,
category.
no, it
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't. No, no. But it's interesting though, because that in those initial conversations, if if it's suddenly turned black and white, that's what I was saying about sometimes for the woman to look at it and say, okay, wait a minute, it's not the same as if you actually were having sex with someone. I don't have to like it, but if you can find that there's some room to recognize degree, it opens up the conversation. Then you can say, well, gee, what is that about? I don't have to think like you're cheating on me, but you're doing something I really don't like. What's going on? It,
Yeah.
it opens up the
Curiosity, right?
possibility, quite different from feeling like, oh no, this is just an inherent deal breaker. And for
Yeah.
some people, it is a deal breaker, and then they break the deal. I mean, that's what happens. But for
Yeah.
other people, it doesn't have to be necessarily if they can question some of their own assumptions, which is that's the work of therapy all the time. Is it doesn't mean rejecting them, but it does mean looking at them because the assumptions we don't know we're making are the ones where a lot of stuff happens that can cause difficulty.
Yeah. Yeah. It might be worth noting just one thing we have observed too. I am using pornography a little bit as a blanket statement. And I think what you just brought up about, well, it's not like being able to get to a point where it's clear that this is not the same as having sex with someone.
Hmm.
Sometimes there is a spectrum where it's more similar or close to that.
Yeah,
The rise
with
of
the internet,
platforms
Well, it does
with
mean
the
you're not
internet.
having sex with your partner if you're having sex,
but
Yeah.
that's true of
Well, yeah.
masturbation without it. Without,
well,
Right.
yes.
Right. Which obviously there's like it makes sense why emotionally it feels like so you're just like you want to go look at other people or get off on your own instead
yeah,
of connecting with me like in our so that makes sense emotionally. But we do see a spectrum nowadays with the rise of platforms like OnlyFans where these are like
right,
real chat rooms with real people and there's a lot of like the spectrum too of somebody searching for pornography. These sites kind of blend together these days. So it's not really like, oh, I'm only looking at static images. Some people that might be the case, but unfortunately, I think it's become where the gradient line between someone who's like, yeah, I never want to cheat. That's like most of these men are not, having a desire to cheat on their wives, and I think they
yeah,
feel really bad even just about the fact that they are turning to and feel like this idea of lust towards other women and they wish that they didn't feel that and they're trying to and it's not really about their partner, right? It's about these deeper pain points and anyways, but it's like okay, it's getting over time I need more stimulus to kind of satisfy the same craving,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so it's moving into like I'm engaging with real people through these online chat
yeah,
rooms and that does get even more blurry of like that feels a lot closer to infidelity. So I only bring that up because I think the whole spectrum, for a betrayed partner, I think it's important to validate that all of it is hurtful. If that's how it feels, it makes
oh yeah,
total sense. And it's also like when we can get to a place of curiosity and realizing that all of these things are really more of symptoms to a deeper, like there's some deeper need that
yeah,
this person
yeah,
has likely not learned to meet, and this is just them trying to go fill a need, and it's probably not. Probably does not have to do with you directly,
hmm,
you in the
yeah,
relationship. It probably stems back to their childhood because like 99% of the time like this type of sexual behavior turning to pornography in some form did not start as an adult. It started before that. So I
yeah,
think just having that openness, that curiosity, like you talked about, for sure, is the gateway to start healing for both partners.
hmm, yeah.
How can couples go about rebuilding emotional intimacy after something like this, or even during something like this?
Hmm. Well, I think you guys have already answered that on other episodes. Like I listened to when you guys talk a lot about stability, and I think stability. Feel free to jump in. My understanding in this context is stability is the focus. And for there to be intimacy when there's been this rupture, this betrayal of
Yeah.
trust, because that's what it is. It's a betrayal of trust. What is real about this person that I thought I knew? How do I
Yeah.
reconcile this new information with this person that I've known and loved for so long? What does this mean about us? What does this mean about me? Um, there has to be stability. I think that is the first step. And I will make a disclaimer again that I am not the betrayal trauma expert, but there are a lot of people out there, and you guys you've written content and talked about this too. Like in order for there to be healing, we first have to restore some sense of stability. If things are totally spinning in
Yeah.
chaos, it's not time to think about how do we restore closeness. We
Yeah.
need to restore um,
Well, trust, really.
trust.
Well,
Yep.
even before that, when I talk about forgiveness, the kind of forgiveness I'm talking about isn't about necessarily rebuilding the relationship. It's about getting hold of yourself so you're not freaking out at the very thought, which is all
Yeah.
about stability. We talk about stability and intimacy. Stability is about lowering the level of anxiety. You have to do that before you can think clearly at all about trust.
Yeah.
So to get to that place, and it sounds like that's a lot of what a group like your or a app like yours does. It helps people get to that place where they've got some degree of emotional regulation going on. So then they can think about,
And
all right,
both
how do we
partners
move
need that.
forward? Yeah,
For
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. Right. And it's like the betrayed partner needs that just as much, which is hard because it feels like this was sprung on me. I didn't choose this.
Hmm.
This was
Right.
clearly you and your decisions brought this up one day out of the blue in our life. We discovered this and it turned the world upside down. But what I have heard a lot of good friends of mine in the space that are experts in betrayal trauma therapy is like, um, she at some point has the choice to take ownership and responsibility for her own
Yeah.
healing because whether it's not necessarily your fault that this trauma occurred, but there is this wound, and you have to at some point decide, am I going to take ownership to address the wound? And that I think that ownership, what that looks like is, she's now focused on owning her healing journey, and he's
Yes.
focused on owning his healing journey. And what that can lead to, I think, is rebuilding us
Yeah.
together. Right.
Yeah, and when it does, of course, and I always find this very inspiring because when they actually can do that, when they can actually, forgive themselves and each other, basically. And I have a third step I call forgiving God, actually, which,
Mm,
I mean, I know you're religious. We're religious in a different way. We're Jewish, but
that's awesome.
there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't have to be religious to appreciate that concept of saying, okay, I can recognize I was doing the best I can, even though, I wish I'd known better. I wish I'd detected it. I can recognize, all right, you were dealing with that basic hurt, and that's, this is a symptom of other stuff. I can forgive that. Now I have to forgive that this happens. It's like I thought
That this
things were
happened to
okay,
me.
that this
Yeah.
happened to me, and that happens that this we live in a universe where we think we have sort of control over what happens, and we're wrong. And then we get hurt badly, even though we don't deserve it.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. We have to be able to forgive that as well.
Mm,
And when couples can do that, that's when they can be curious. That's when they can actually start to hear each other. And when they heal from that, they have a better relationship than they had before. And
yeah.
I've heard people expressing gratitude for that. I've never heard anybody say thanks for cheating. They don't say that, but they will say, "Hey, apparently there was a crisis brewing, and thanks for precipitating the crisis because apparently we needed it. Look how much better off we are now. We discovered things we didn't realize were going on, both of us."
Yeah.
And that's, I find that very inspiring when a couple can get there.
So can I ask you
Yeah.
something personal?
Yeah. Sure.
You might not answer it. So you said you started when you were about 14, and then you went for help when you were 17.
Yeah. Yeah. It was my senior year
So
of high
this
school.
happened before you met the woman that you're now
Hmm.
married to.
Hmm.
So how did having this background affect your relationships once you got past that addiction
Yeah.
stage?
Well, I was past that addiction stage is something I'll maybe double click on that wording because I wasn't
Hmm.
necessarily like my journey wasn't linear. I did make a
Mhm.
lot of progress pretty quickly, and this was very typical of like the way I saw myself. It was I got into that program and I worked it harder than anyone else, and I made progress just about as fast as you possibly could. And it was, of course, it was a little bit shallow, and it was still kind of maybe coming from a performance mindset rather than a like surrendering to like what maybe the deeper layers of healing that needed to happen. So I ended up having more relapses, and it was over the years. I met my wife when we were in college. At the time that I met her and we were starting to date, I want to say I had maybe a month of not acting out in any way. So it was like for me pretty good. Again, like my cycle was maybe once a week, or getting to it 2 3 weeks was like I could do it, but it was usually around there that I would have another form of relapse. So I was like, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm on a good trajectory, and I wanted to be open with her from the beginning. So that was my intention. Was before I'm dating anyone exclusively, or as we're becoming exclusive, I want to be transparent from the beginning, and I want
Mhm.
to get her thoughts on it. And I don't just want to share, hey, I look at porn, or I used to look at porn. I wanted to be like, hey, this is a journey I've been on. There is this thing, but it's not just, again, it's not just dumping on her, hey, I looked at porn. What I tried to do, I don't remember the exact conversation like wording, or it was years ago now, but what I tried to do was show her more of what I was learning about myself, how I got there in the first place, and what this journey has meant for me. That gratitude that you were talking about, Bruce, about like it's still not something that I'm proud of or that I've wanted in my life, and I wish I could say that I'm further along maybe than I actually am right now. But here's the ways that I've already seen kind of how this is shaping the guy that you know, the guy that you like, that you're falling in love with. And that was a conversation that we had. It was hard for her to hear. She needed a few days. Again, there wasn't any like this was at the beginning of the relationship. I had not necessarily, been in the relationship deceiving her, or so this wasn't a
Mhm.
discovery of betrayal, at least in how she perceived it. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, how do I reconcile like this guy that I was feeling really good about, and now there's this new
Right.
information. And that's how she's described it. We've gone on a couple podcasts together, and she's like, yeah, it was like, what if what I know about Chandler is still accurate? How does this kind of fit in with the character of this guy
Yeah.
that I've
Yeah.
that I've been getting to know and like? And how do I feel about this in committing to something long term going forward? And we ended up getting married pretty young, and so like in that first year, she was able to kind of work through this understanding of like this isn't defining of who Chandler is.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think a lot of the things I do like about him are because he's chose to confront this and to
Yeah.
choose to
Mm-hmm.
seek deeper healing. And so that I think was for me, like I still think I was in some degree of shame because she was like, I think you're still being really hard on yourself. I did have
Mhm.
some slips after that. It's not like things were all roses. But even as we got married, as we got further into our relationship, and like I said, now we have a kid. We have our second one on the way right now. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
like our family's growing, and as the years have
Would you
gone on, we've
say
kept.
would you say in
Oh,
Hebrew to that is b'sha'ah tova, which means in a good time, in good time. That's what you
mm,
say when say, yeah, you
Ishatova.
should, yeah, b'sha'ah tova. B'sha'ah means hour, the right hour.
Uh-huh.
Like
Oh,
your
cool.
child should be born at the right hour and everything should go well. That's all that means. So
That's awesome.
b'sha'ah
I
tova.
love it. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's felt like I've seen like, God's hand. I felt like we felt really good very clearly. And part of the reason why we felt like we were each other's person, we were like, let's like, we want to commit, which is maybe countercultural for, 80, 90% of people these days. We were like, it feels right. We had both been in quite a few relationships before that, but we felt kind of on a spiritual level, like
Mhm.
we are a good fit. Like she felt like the type of person that I wanted to marry, and I wanted to get married, and that was always something I knew. And part of this, like my why for why I didn't want porn in my life was when I think about the type of husband and father I want to be, porn doesn't really fit into that picture for me. It doesn't
Yeah.
quite fit the mold of the type of man and leader that I aspired to be. And so being transparent about that and having dialogue about it at the beginning, yeah, she had to do her work to figure out, how to see
Yeah.
this from some higher perspective. And then as we've gone on throughout the relationship, when there were some slips, um, figuring out how do we navigate this, now that there's a deeper dimension to our relationship, to our growing family, but I think also realizing that, um, again, sobriety is not the end all metric. And I think we've
Mhm.
together come to learn that yes, there's these like desires for kind of this congruence and the way that we both are behaving and making choices in our individual life and the values that we're living. Like that integrity helps build that stability for the
Mhm.
relationship,
Yeah.
but also at the same time, we are each going to walk out of congruence. We're going to, because we still carry and we'll accumulate new wounds over time and new brokenness and new
Mhm.
imperfections, and we'll hurt each other and annoy each other. And, both in the relationship and just individually as imperfect
Yeah.
people living life, we will continue to have to learn how to navigate these trials where it feels like I wish this other person was maybe different, but they are currently dealing with whatever they're dealing with. And for
Yeah.
my wife, I think realizing that she's also got her own stuff and that maybe
Mhm.
my thing with porn isn't so unique and special. At the same time, it can still be hurtful. And that makes total
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
sense. And I can still take total ownership over that. And also, she can have her own trials. And we as a couple are just learning these higher order skills of how to have stability and intimacy through
Mhm.
these imperfections, through these cracks. And that's been, we have not mastered it. I'll just end with that.
If you said you had, I would be thinking,
Yeah. Yeah.
wait
And
till,
that's the end of the, yeah.
wait till the next thing.
Wait till
But
we're
no,
older. Yeah.
When you were talking about how your wife was, sort of handled the information early on, I was thinking that's a summary of the process of building trust. Because it's interesting, the fact that it wasn't a betrayal for her, it was new information, but you were early in the relationship. You didn't have that expectation
Yeah.
of anything really. She was hopeful because she said, "Hey, we've got a great guy here." She was hopeful, but then you gave her some information you thought she ought to have, and she had to incorporate that. But that idea that what, if I'm remembering how you said it, she had to figure out that, wow, this great guy I know that's not inconsistent with a guy who has this issue. That's what rebuilding trust
Both can be true.
requires.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is different. Forgiveness is an inside job. It's like, well, I can let go of being angry at somebody that I have no intention of ever having a relationship with. It's like, well, okay, that hurt. I get it. They were dealing with their stuff. I just don't want any part of it. But if to rebuild trust requires that level of understanding, it's like, okay, now I got to do, if I want to trust this person, I have to develop an understanding that a good person, a person I can respect and love and want to be with, could also have that particular sort of flaw or that particular kind of struggle. And when you can wrap your brain around that, then you can rebuild trust. And
Yeah.
it's very much what
Yeah.
you were describing.
That's super well put. And I think it's not her surrendering any sort of expectation for sobriety. Like I think
Oh, not
her
at
being
all.
able to
Yeah.
say, I still deeply want to get to a point where I can expect and know that there is complete sobriety because
Hmm.
that's something that is important to us and to me. And also I can understand and have like trust in who you are as a person. So it's like both of those things can be true rather than kind of this black and
Yes,
white, either things are
exactly.
this way or I'm this way.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah. So how can people find out about Relay and sign up for it? And I think I know the answer, but you say it.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, they can go to our website. It's www.joinrelay.app, and you can also just go to the App Store and search it there.
Hmm.
So again, it's like if you go to the website, it talks about porn addiction, but really it's any degree of unwanted sexual behavior, any degree of infidelity that's pulling you away from your values, your integrity. If this is something that's impacting your relationship, like I really just want to end with the note of like you're not alone. So many
Hmm.
other couples out there are navigating this and they are seeing hope. I love that you brought up that oftentimes it's not saying I'm so glad that we had this challenge, but it is often like wow, we do feel a deeper sense of closeness and trust than we
Hmm.
ever did before. And I think that's the message of hope that I would leave. So yeah, check out the app on the App Store or visit the website if you do want to get some support.
And we will put that on the notes for this episode. Thank you so much for doing
You.
this.
Oh, thank you guys for
Gee,
the work
you're
you're doing. Like again, I
welcome.
think this is so much less about changing behavior and more about how do we rebuild real healthy relationships.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome back. That was quite an interview.
Yeah,
That was
it was.
really interesting.
Yeah, I
What
found
a
it
thoughtful young man.
indeed very thoughtful and
Sounds so
doing
old.
good
A
work.
thoughtful young man.
And
He is young.
yes, I know. It's funny. I keep noticing that. It's like, how come I keep being older than so many more people?
I
It's
know,
kind of how
right?
it works. That's how it works, folks. But ain't it fun? Anyway, if you'd like to get in touch with us, as we said earlier, just go to our website, ctn7.com.
Right. And if you have a topic you'd like to talk about, if you'd like to be on our show, if a topic that you would like to talk about, you can also go to ctn7.com. Or if you don't want to talk about it, but you'd like us to talk about it, we'd be happy to talk about it. So you can let us know by going to our website, or if you have a question or something else that you'd like to say, send us a note on email us. You can go, there are links on ctn7.com.
That's the way to do it.
Uh-huh.
And so until next time,
Remember, be kind
don't panic.
and have faith.